Welcome to Feel Better with Tara Stiles. I'm Tara Stiles. Welcome to the show. Yay. All right, today I'm kind of admitting I haven't read a parenting book yet. I've been avoiding them big time in my own parenting journey, but I broke that, for whatever reason, unconscious habit to read an actually pretty awesome parenting book that's going beyond how to do this, how not to do that, those rigid rules that for me just feel like, another thing to do. So, this book is called The Yoga of Parenting, and it's by an awesome gal that I met recently who I kind of know through friends of friends of friends, but I'm getting to know more and more. And she's really, really awesome. You're going to love her. Her name's Sarah Ezrin. Here's the book. It's great. And I'm reading it and I'm thinking, this is so funny. Of course, synchronicity. She talks about the breath. She talks about ease. She talks about all of the things that I try to do in my own practice and in my own relationship with Daisy and Mike and all of you and everyone that I meet, really. And of course, it's never perfect, but it's a practice. So I love her approach. In this book, The Yoga of Parenting, it's not a sort of made up approach. It's not rigid. It's at least what I'm grasping so far about creating space, creating that pause, taking that breath before a big reaction happens internally and externally. And I think it's really relatable, whether you're a parent or a person in the world doing your thing. So let's get into it with Sarah Ezrin. Enjoy, and I'll see you soon. All right. So, Miss Sarah Ezrin, I'm so excited about your book. And we were just talking, and I threw myself under the bus a bit. And it's really easy because I've never read a parenting book kind of on purpose. So, I met you and I kind of know about you for a long time, but I started reading your book and I just kept reading and diving in and going, oh my gosh, this feels so exciting because there's so much to learn and practice. And like you were saying earlier, this permission, the pause, the breath. So, can you just tell me how you went from yourself as doing these things and becoming a mom and then thinking, okay, I'm going to write the yoga of parenting. Boom. Like, how did this happen?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me on here. I greatly admire you. And like I just told you right now, I mean, every conversation we've had so far has been so much fun. So I'm just really excited to dive in on this and that we get to share it. But I also need to know how you read a parenting book by accident because you said you've never read one on purpose. How do you read one by accident?
Well, by accident, I feel like I met you, kind of synchronicity maybe because I'm reading it and I'm thinking you have these little words maybe they're like my sign words or my clue words or whatever. You're like pause. I'm like, yes, I love
Mm.
that. Like breathe. And it's not just breathe, but then how you say like permission and then even your friends that were yoga teachers, you talked about them sharing yoga and that's like a huge thing that I've
Mm.
always loved too. So just this real kind of, not guru student structure of yoga that we've all kind of been a part of too, but this real kind of real yoga that we all feel when the yoga feels like us. So I think reading your book is a little bit of a very much happy accident for sure. But, I really need to know like how you because there's so many parenting books and there's so many yoga books and this one's really needed because it's really like you said open, but there is so much information on how you can make your life just simply feel better and your
Mm.
parenting and your family life and harmony and all the things.
Well, I read many parenting books on purpose. Many parenting. I read every parenting book that you possibly could because I'm an A type. And I was like, I'm going to nail this birth and I'm going to nail this parenting thing, which, any parent listening, please, you're even dog owners, right? If you're trying to care for another human that's out of your control as a caretaker, and what ended up happening is, everything didn't, went completely differently than I had
Mm.
planned, starting with the birth. And then, obviously the pandemic hit. My son was only 3 months old when all the shutdowns happened. I ended up having very severe postpartum anxiety, like to the point where I
Mm,
was like frozen, couldn't function, couldn't leave the house.
mm,
And I went to books for solace because that's what I always did. I would go to
mm,
yoga books for solace and I would go to psychology books for solace. And I went to parenting books and they all made me feel worse.
mm,
And so many of them were like what you were saying, which was that they were rule based, right? Or they were very behaviorally focused on the child. And I really needed something for me. And then the parenting books, there was a couple that really spoke to me that were mindful parenting, but all
mm,
that's from the Buddhist perspective. So
mm.
there's like a great book called Buddhism for Young Mothers, which I loved. But I was like, where's our book, right? Like, where's our language? And I want to use the term tapas when I'm explaining something.
Mm,
And, like, let's look at it from a tantric lens or from, some of Patanjali's languaging. And even though there's obviously great crossover, right? Buddha was born, a yogi. That I just wanted to, perhaps have a different vernacular to offer people, and also the physical part of it too, because
mm,
I think as much as I'm like shying away from the physical practice these days, and I'm just being fully honest about that to everybody, as scary as that is to say, I think the poses are such a gateway into these concepts. And, you can learn so much in your body that you can then bring into your parenting and bring into your behavior. So that was kind of how it all came to be was,
mm,
once I started to get the proper help for my severe anxiety and things started to feel a little bit more settled and I was cobbling together my team and my village of what I
mm,
needed. One of the things that I needed was a yoga and parenting book. I couldn't
mm.
really find one anywhere. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go to all the experts and create
Oh, thank you for doing that. Very, very
it.
good. Now we have this. I feel like it's, the what to expect when you're expecting, and then the yoga parents right there.
Thank you.
There you go. Oh
Even
my
that
gosh.
book, right? That book is like a bit
I didn't read
controversial
it.
these days. Yeah, that even that one is like because I study with a prenatal teacher here in LA, Jane Austen, or in LA. I'm not in LA anymore. I'm in San Francisco. Jane Austen, and there's like a joke like, don't read that book, right? I mean,
Mm,
it's like, and yet it's the text that everybody hands you, and
mm,
it's yeah. I mean, where's the real talk, right? And I think that was where the permission side of it came in
mm,
too. That was the other thing is I would read books that were mindful parenting or conscious parenting, but they were all like buttoned up solutions. It was like,
mm,
this is the story, and this teenager started ditching school and taking drugs, and then the dad and mom came to see me and we had a
mm.
conversation, and then they had a conversation, and now the kid is fine. And it's like, that's not reality. Like, sorry,
Yeah.
coming from a history of alcoholism and addiction and mental health, like, it's not a buttoned up solution. There is no one size fits all. So how do you create a resource for people to help them find their own answers
Mm,
and to just really be the container for them to normalize it, whatever it is that they're going through and whatever they need in that moment.
mm. Awesome. Can you talk, if you're comfortable, um, a little bit about your kind of past growing up? You mentioned it in the book a little bit, like being in therapy since a young child and working through all of that. And, so much of that resonated with me. And I know so many other people that we don't want to repeat what happened in our households. And, I can kind of look back a few generations, and have forgiveness for my folks, knowing their folks and knowing their folks and being like, well, it does keep getting better. Progress is happening. But, I love our mutual friend, Zibby Owens' tagline,
Mm.
stories are best when shared. And when you were sharing your story, it really hit me like, oh, this is so healing and nice to be reminded that it's not just about making these good choices and doing these practices, but really understanding where you're coming from, maybe as an author, but as readers, understanding where we're coming from in even making these choices to try to parent in a more mindful way or have a better relationship with ourselves in that process. So, do you mind explaining maybe a little bit of your own story or maybe a little bit of your kind of hope or wish for us as readers to have that reflection on, what the heck happened to us and how do we
Yeah.
want to make it better moving forward?
It's so challenging because I feel bad when I come on and I'm like, and then this happened and this, and it's like, but there was also so much love. And it's exactly like what you say. Like when you look back at like how my parents were raised, well, like no wonder there was, this, and this. So, it all makes sense. And all we can do is continue to improve every
Mm,
generation. I will say that there was a baseline of love and connection, but there was a lot of disconnection. And I like I mentioned, there was a lot of alcoholism and drug addiction going on, and betrayal. And when I was 8 years old, I started to act out, as is common for a kid that's in this chaos. Also, I had siblings. All my siblings are much older than me, 10 to
mm,
15 years older. And so they were being kicked out and
mm,
into rehab and out of rehab. It was a really chaotic time, and I started to act out, and I became what's called the identified patient or the
mm,
identified child, which is that the little kid is acting out and the adults are who are really acting out, but the little kid is acting in response, and suddenly everybody focuses on the little kid
mm,
and puts all of the energy into that. So I ended up actually getting misdiagnosed as bipolar. I
mm,
was put on a slew of meds at a very young age. But the benefit of all of this is that it got my entire family into therapy.
mm,
Everybody started to see a therapist, and everybody started to be interested in the self inquiry work. And, even though it took a few years of, not being on the right meds, and then finally meeting a therapist that got me off everything and started to teach me meditation and was like, no, she's just highly anxious, like very
mm,
different. I couldn't have gotten to that place were it not for the misunderstanding and the misdiagnosis before. Do you know what I mean?
mm,
I don't think we would have been ready for me to see a therapist that was teaching me visualization meditation at
mm,
12 had I not already been with these more harsher kind of Freudian, my dad was in like analysis, right? Where you like lay on
mm.
the couch for, 3 hours a day for 6 days a week. And I do believe that all those things kind of had to happen to get us to the points that we were. And then we did a lot of healing work over the years. I mean, people continued to get sober and then go out and, when go out's like what they say in the program, like, then they would not be sober and,
Mm,
have a slip in recovery. And that continued for a while. But around my early 20s, everything started to finally stabilize. And it gave my family this beautiful opportunity to come together and to look back on what was going on, to really do major healing work and therapy. And it created this new beautiful chapter for all of us where I feel like we're in a much more, real and authentic place. It was that starting over and those moments of forgiveness that inform my parenting now.
mm,
So like I'm gonna mess up, right? I mean, I already have many times. I'm gonna mess up. You know, I mean, who knows, right? What kind, how
mm,
the gravity of the mess up or the brevity
mm,
of it. But I hope that I too will have the wherewithal to be able to come to the other side of it, for
mm.
all of us to get grounded, to be able to look at what the benefits of those things are, and to be able to learn from them. So it's not, it's tempting, right, to be like, well, this happened to me and this happened. And then
Mm.
you're in the victim role and you're blaming your parents. But what are you all learning from those things, and what are the benefits? And then how can you also bring that kind of a lens into your parenting too?
Wow. That's super cool that you all kind of got through it together. They must be really proud of you. Were they kind of freaked out about you writing this book and exposing their lives a little bit, or were they just like, "Yay, good for you,
Well, I don't know
Sarah.
if
We're
you know,
happy."
my dad is a record producer, so he's got thousands of interviews, hours of
Mm,
interviews out there, and he's really open about like his
cool.
drug abuse and when he quit. And he was like in the early days of rock. He was 19 and he had a gold
Mm,
record.
wow.
So like he's very open about that. That's what that was. And then my mom has passed. My
Mm,
mom passed in 2010, But before she passed, she was really deep in the recovery program, always very open about
Mm,
her, everything. Like we've just been kind of, an open family
mm.
when it comes to that. But yeah, I don't know if they know, like, I mean, I don't even think it's gotten that deep, some of the stuff, but I do wonder sometimes. I'm like, has he even read it? Like, does he know? I did give him a chapter to read when I was first working on the book. And he was like, that's not how it went. And like, total revisionist history. And I was like, exactly how it went. So there's definitely a little bit of that, but again, it's all learning, and I use the stories to show all of our growth and to show the many gifts that come out of growing up in uncertainty, and the truths of living with alcoholism and addiction and mental illness, and
Mm.
the beautiful gifts that can come on the other side of all of those experiences.
Oh, it's amazing. It really is hopeful. And I love the perspective of learning and improving and growing. And I know just hearing you say that really reminds me of all the things that I'm kind of in the middle of in my own life now. And instead of being like, oh, I got to go do that thing, I got to go help my mom with that thing, it's like, what can I learn from this situation? And do my best to make it a healing process as well. So I think this book goes beyond, when I was reading a little bit more this morning, goes beyond parenting, from my perspective, mother to child, to, maybe it's because you have all of this really rich family history and healing, but I was thinking of my own mom and the
Mm.
relationship with her too. So I really think it's, the yoga of parenting everyone. New subtitle. My goodness.
Yeah,
But
it's the like parenting yourself, the parenting
yeah,
your parents, the yes,
yeah.
absolutely, the parenting your partner, that it's all of those things. I love that.
Yeah, no, thanks for that too, because Mike had this whole moment this morning, and he thinks that he lost Daisy's iPad, which is like for him, like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? She's doing this like learning game on it. She's gonna stagnate in her reading. And he thinks that he put it on top of the car and drove off. And normally I would
Uh-oh.
just like flip out on him. And he's like, I already put another one in the cart. And I'm like, just chill, it'll be okay. And he's like, why are you being so chill about it? I'm like, what else are we gonna do? I'm reading The Yoga of Parenting by Sarah Ezrin right now. I'm feeling very, taking that breath, taking that pause. And you have so many good prompts in this taking the breath, taking the pause. And I like it because I feel like I come at it on the other side, and I could use more of what you're sharing. I feel like I do a lot of the self-care and the breathing and the moving and the practice myself. So like I build up that bank a little bit, so then when I'm doing all the hard things, I can manage it. So
Mm.
I need a little bit more of what you're describing, which is right in the middle of, you described that moment where was it your son threw a water, like a stainless steel water bottle, and you were like, not going to freak out, but you like took a breath with him. And I'm like, well, that's pretty, evolved. I probably
Oh,
would
no,
have
no,
freaked
no, no,
out.
no, no, no. You missed the first part where I even admit to grabbing his arm and taking him into the other room and like about to be like, what are you through? It was a 3-week-old baby, and he picked
Mm,
up this like gigantic water bottle and threw it. I couldn't believe it. I mean, and there was many, many murder attempts after that between the brothers. It continues to this day. Now I'm just like, oh, just push him into the wall, not the
mm,
glass. It becomes very different. But no, there was not involved. But it just was later, as we were both kind of, as I was trying to co-regulate with him. But
mm.
no, do not worry. I was just talking to someone today who I'm potentially interviewing, and they said they've never yelled at their kids, and they were never
Wow.
yelled at growing up. And I'm like, I don't relate to that. And I'm dying to know. My question is going to be, well, then is anger an acceptable emotion in your home?
Mm,
Because there are benefits to anger, and
yep.
we're allowed to feel angry. It's how we utilize it, right? But anger
Mm,
is like an activating emotion. It
mm.
can lead to change, and so it's just really interesting, And yes, no worry, that not at all am I enlightened. I'm sure I yelled at someone this morning, and it's all part of it. But how do you come back together at the
Mm.
other side? And how do you own your part in that? Because I mean, going back to my family, there was a lot of explosive anger, but there was no apologizing.
Mm,
There was
mhm,
no taking responsibility for the adult side of it. The
mm,
children were made to feel like they did something wrong.
mm.
where if I didn't meditate this morning and I
Mm.
snapped at my husband and I snapped at my kids and I've apologized to everybody and I
Mm.
explained I didn't meditate this morning. I didn't have any alone time yet. And this is why I had an expectation. I talked it
Mm.
through with them. So I feel like that's going to be almost more beneficial than either just skating
Mm.
on the surface and not really going underneath of what's deep, or obviously, that more authoritarian, which is what we were all raised in, which was just like yell and, you're the kid, you're wrong automatically.
Yeah, what books were our parents reading? I mean, gosh,
Dr.
I don't
Spock,
know.
dude, Dr. Spock, which was literally like, everything was very distanced. I mean,
Mm.
it's true,
True.
right? It was like it was the Ferber method and Dr. Spock, and kids should be over there and be quiet. And it's, I mean, it's one of the reasons I think that our generation is as exhausted as we
Mm.
are and burnt out as we are as parents, because there's a level of attunement and ownership and presence and accountability that comes with being a parent in today's age, if that's the path you choose,
Mm.
right? And the wellness in, being a seeker, but it's exhausting to be like constantly present and owning what you're doing, right? It's much easier for me to just be like, put your shoes on because I said so, than for me to like get down. Wait, what's going on? Why, we're running a little late, but I understand. Like, that's much harder and more exhausting, but the lasting effects are well worth it, obviously.
Oh my gosh. All right, so that's incredible. So another question around, and this is just a selfish question, and I'm going to do that more in the moment. I'm big on apology with Daisy and with Mike too. And Mike doesn't say he's sorry, but I think he's more like, I read something recently about the Dutch and how they say they're sorry, but only when they've done something wrong. And I kind of just say sorry if anybody's done
Mm.
anything wrong. Like just to
It's
let's
for
talk
other
about,
people.
so
You apologize for him.
yeah, for everybody, but maybe I just need to get into therapy about that. But but how do you work on with this yoga parenting lens, this, moving into the direction that you need to move on, like with little things with her. I mean, I have to create something at some point, otherwise like the demand will just be ridiculous. Like this morning Mike had a Tai Chi Zoom and I'm pushing her on the swing and I'm trying to, knit at the same time. And she's like, stop knitting because you're not giving me attention. And I'm like, okay, fine. So I stop knitting. And then it's sort of like, make sure you look out for the neighbor boys to come. And it's like the list of demands, like, just keep going up. And I could, keep up with them. But I was even telling her, I'm like, I'm reading my friend's book. And she's talking about like, like having this more mindful approach. And, maybe we need to figure out a way where I give you all these things and you do get all these things from me. But at a certain point, how do you create that? Okay, you can't have another lollipop. You can't do this. Like, that's dangerous. Or even like, we can't do that right now, because I don't feel like it in a way. Not that I would say that or try not to say that, but it's just not going to happen right now. So how do you do this, Sarah?
Oh my God, girl, I have like no problem setting limits in this household. We have no problem with that. I think the conversation we have to pull out a little bit and
Mm.
talk about different styles of parenting. So like when we're referring to the houses many of us grew up in when we were, living in the 80s and the early 90s, that would be considered more of what's called an authoritarian home, where it's like my way or the highway, not really checking in with your kids to see what they need in that moment, obviously providing food and shelter, maybe a tiny string of love. But then I think what you're referring to is like what ended up happening, in the
Mm.
like in early 2000s or whatever, which was, the permissive, almost helicopter parent,
Mm. Mhm.
where everything was given and, there are no rules. There's tons of connection, which is wonderful. And that creates, fantastic long-term self-esteem and the ability to have interpersonal relationships. But because they don't have that, like, the limit and the container, it can also lead to those feelings of out of control. There can be regulation issues in the long run. And this is all in the parenting,
Mhm.
psychology research. But what we need to find is the middle ground, which
Mm.
is the authoritative style, which, when you go on like TikTok, you're looking up like gentle parenting, conscious parenting, pause. Like it seems like there's literally like thousands.
Mm.
Most of those are going to fall in that middle section. Empathic parenting, which is a mix of the connection piece for sure, but also definitely the limits, right? There has to be the limits. And in those kids end up, the long-term results of that are phenomenal, right?
Mm.
And because they have the interpersonal skills from the connection, they have the mood regulation from the connection, but they also, have their own personal limit setting. There's less risk-taking behavior when they
Mm-hmm.
get older. There's a lot more, regulation when it comes to mood, which I think I already said. So it's like that sweet spot of like,
Mm.
no, I am doing this right now. And the other thing too is like the boundaries of our time and their time, and what we need to do right now and what they need to do. I think you have every right to be like, I'm going to knit right now and you can do this right now. I mean, absolutely. But, having the conversation and then knowing maybe it's a day she really needs you. That's the
Mm.
day, you put it down and you're with her more, but you can't do that 24/7, right? That's not sustainable for parents to be fully invested to that level.
Yeah,
People
this
do
is
it,
why I
but
need your book. This is why we all need your book. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm really lucky because I have Mike, and when I get to the exhaustion point, we just switch, and then sometimes
Mhm.
there's school, but now it's summer. so, so yeah, I'm definitely needing a lot of work on that, but also enjoying the time. But let's talk about, if it's okay with you, the practices, because I think this is really so helpful for all of us to think of our, whether it's our yoga time. And I read your article in Zibby Mag as well. And it was cool because it was like, was it like 4 things to do yoga that will help with your parenting that aren't actually yoga? And I was like, this girl's rad. So it's not just about, in your practice, and you do have physical practices here. I love like this restorative stuff, especially. I did that after reading a little bit this morning. Like Sarah says to just lie on the ground. And so I did that. I'm like, that was really good. I never would have done that just on my own. But can you share a bit about the practices that we can do, whether it's physical or other things that can help with all of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I feel like isn't your style very like grounded and
Yeah,
liquid
yeah.
and like, yeah, I feel like you're on the ground. That's like, I feel like you're more on the ground than like me with my Ashtanga background, or I'm like, okay, Tadasana, jump, do this. I think we have to go back to defining what yoga is or how we explain what it is. And like you and I know because we've read the books and we've studied philosophy that the asana practice is just like this tiny, 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 tiny sliver in the whole lineage and umbrella of practices. But I think a lot of people just when you say the word yoga, they automatically assume, the physical postures, but meditation, mantra, prayer, I mean, you could argue for dance, right? If it's,
Mm.
ecstatic dance or, think of the Sufis spinning, really anything that brings you into that place of connection and of oneness, I feel like could be considered yoga. I mean, I
Mm.
know I talked to someone recently that was like, no, yoga must be trikonasana. And I'm like, I don't know, I don't know. Or at least maybe that's just what I'm telling myself now. It's like my body is broken and I'm like postpartum and
Mm.
can't do the physical practice in the same way. But I just don't have the same interest in the physical part of it. Now I still move my body, right? I still like, I'll go for a hike. I'll go I do like HIIT training. Like, I think we
Mm.
talked about this before.
Yeah, yeah.
I do like F45 or the class, I'll do that kind of stuff. But when it comes to my yoga and my meditation, I like to be quiet on a cushion, or I
Mm.
like to be breathing with my son, or I like to be practicing mantra.
Mm.
And all of those things, they all are yoga. So it's like
Mm.
that redefinition of what it is. And the coolest part is that as busy parents, those are all things we can do at any time. I dropped the kids off and took a few breaths in the car.
Mm.
I can practice mantra when my intrusive thoughts are kicking in.
Mm.
It's like those really scary random thoughts that you get, especially around, your kids.
Mm.
And how wonderful that like I don't have to unroll my mat and do like a full on 2-hour practice anymore. Not, I do miss it, but it's just such a different time right now.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like I've always been a lazy yoga practitioner that's like kept me doing it all the time because I only do what feels nice for me. And I'm like,
Yeah.
if it doesn't feel like if it's too challenging, I'm just not gonna do it. I mean, I'll do it, but like in a soft way. So no, but
But
I love those moments. Yeah.
that's the ultimate advanced practice, right? Like you're listening to your body and you're doing what feels good and you're tapping into that. I mean, that's why your classes are so like, it's like, water, right? It's just so beautiful in the movement of it. So, versus like those of us that like forced ourselves into these kind of harsher, more austere practices for years on end, body be darned, like, you're having like screaming sensations. But I feel like now my practice is much more intuitive. And I think my parenting is what initiated
Mm.
that.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I feel like we all shake down to the same stuff in so many different ways at some point. So, oh my gosh. I want to ask also with kids and, you as a parent, but also as a yoga teacher, what are your thoughts on leading yoga with kids, doing yoga with kids, teaching kids yoga? What do you think about all that?
Well, I say all the time, I am not a kids yoga teacher.
Mhm.
I have somebody asked if I wanted to teach like kids meditation. I was like, no, not really. I think it's a very special skill.
Mhm.
It's like beginners teachers, right? Like I think
Mhm.
it's an art form and
Mhm.
it's not my personal skill. That being said, I love it for the kids. I
Mhm.
think it's amazing. And I watch my sons, when they do it, or, there's all the YouTube stuff now, or I'm a local gal here, Jocelyn K. Levy has We Yogis Play, which is like
Mhm.
a brick and mortar space that they can go to. Like, I love watching that with them. And I think, anytime that you have this opportunity for connection and movement and you're doing it together, because,
Mhm.
they're not in there to learn like how to ground their big toe down,
Mhm.
they're in there when you're in there with them and you're accompanying them as a parent, you're in there to be connecting to one another. I mean,
Mhm.
that's the
Mhm.
ultimate benefit of it. Postnatal yoga, right? Like the baby is a blob on the floor.
Mhm.
Like, you're not actually doing the poses necessarily.
Mhm.
Maybe you
Mhm.
stretch them a little bit, but really you're doing the practice to have a deeper connection with them, to be in this quiet space where you're breathing together. So I am like, all for it. Someone asked me how early kids should be when they start doing yoga. And it's like, I think they kind of come into this world,
Mhm.
doing it, whether they're grabbing their toe or they're just laying there. It's that
Mhm.
that beautiful presence.
So good. Yeah, it's really, obviously, like when you have a kid, you think about all kinds of different things, but made me think with her just being that blob. I noticed if I take care of myself when I picked her up, maybe I was just being like
Mm,
too weird about it. Like if I would like scoop her with, that better intention and a better body position, she wouldn't, cry or fidget or whatever. And when I would just pick her up, she like, less mindful, less yoga parenting style. I definitely got feedback like, this is fine, but this isn't as good as it could be. So I love your whole theme and yoga parenting, how you talk about connection and how you talk about, really looking at all of these practices with connection as the goal. And is that, am I just making that up about the theme of all of this stuff? Because it really feels like, you have so much experience and are delivering so much kind of information there, but it doesn't feel overwhelming because you're saying connect, breathe, it's okay. Is that kind of your overarching did you plan that or that's just how it feels when I'm taking it in?
it is a lot of information, and that's definitely I like want to share everything with everybody all the time. I'm like, here it is, here is everything. So I'm glad that it, hopefully doesn't feel too overwhelming. I mean, it's just going back to the root of
Mm,
yoga and the root of the word, and like Dr. Lauren Roche in the Radiance Sutras explains like how the Sanskrit language is engineered, and he talks about how one word is used to describe many different definitions, right? Like we would
mm,
have different words for every single one of those, but it's one word. And yoga, the things that it's used to describe, it's really cool. It's like a marriage,
mm,
yoking, right? We knew that when you're connecting like to a horse or to an
mm,
oxen. There's like an astrological conjunction, a sum, like arithmetic sum, right? All these things. And when you look at them individually, you realize, oh, the through line is everything is about connection, conjunction,
Mm.
coming together, coming together. So that to me is like, that just that made sense. And it's funny because like when you take your first teacher training, like I remember being in my 200 and everyone's like, the poses, yoga is not the poses. And you're like, sure, sure. And you say it and then you repeat it in your classes for years. But it's, I think it's really when you enter these big phases, whatever that may be. And, it could be the death of somebody super close to you. It could be the birth of, your child. Those are the moments that you realize, oh, this is what the yoga is. It's this moment. It's being
Mm.
fully present for whatever is happening, all of it, even the most uncomfortable and challenging parts.
Oh, so good. All right, corny question, but again, selfish and I hope useful for other people. But what's one thing that we can do, whether the moment is simple, just kind of hanging around in the day, working, whatever, or maybe there's two things and kind of in the middle of oh crap, this is really hard. And I'm noticing this is hard and I'm about to freak out or I've just freaked out or whatever. So are there different things or like tell us what to do in these moments?
Well, I'm hoping you'll tell me and then everybody will tell me because I am still very much learning. I mean, the other thing that's important, that I try to talk about in the book is that we're all so different, right? So
Mm,
like you and I love movement. That's what we do. We're big movers, but maybe for someone else, it's the breath. And maybe for someone else, it's like saying something out loud. And
mm,
I think it really comes down to figuring out what your thing is.
mm.
I mean, I can tell you what mine are, which is, breath is big because I just don't breathe. I like
Mm.
live on an exhale. I don't
I
probably
read that
haven't
about
inhaled
you. I was like,
this
that's
entire
amazing.
conversation. I've probably just been exhaling. And that's very symbolic for my like push through life. So from, taking the breath in the quieter moments, because I don't often remember in the intense moments, I have to be
Mm,
reminded. It's like, my husband's like, back there, giving a thumbs up. But in the intense moments, when I do catch myself, then I do movement of some kind.
mm,
So it's like, shaking out your arm, turning your head, go
mm.
for a walk. Obviously we can't always leave the premises when you have multiple kids. You can't just be like, bye, and like, go for a walk around the block, but you can shake your hands out, do a
Mm.
couple spinal rolls, just something. For me, that's one of the better ways when I'm feeling activated to bring me back to balance.
Oh, so good. I love all of that. And I'm going to do all of that. Because some of them, I mean, my thing is just I'll soften my body and breathe and notice how I feel. And that does it. But I think there's something, maybe it's mental of knowing that there's like a little choice box up above. You can be like, I select this now, or I select mantra. And like, I haven't really gone to mantra in times like this. And I think it's just a great reminder of all the different choices and how, there is so much information. And that's great because you just have, a buffet really presented in yoga parenting to work with. So thank you.
Well, I want to also say thank you to you because after our conversation, you talked so much about body position, and it wasn't
Mm,
something that I'd ever really consciously thought of. I mean, intuitively, I knew to get down to my toddler's level, like if there's a
mm,
meltdown and not like hover over him. And,
mm.
I knew from adjusting students, right? Like just where to stand and how to position yourself. But since we talked, I've been much more aware of like opening myself up to certain people,
Mm.
being able to kind of close off the energy when need to. I had to use that this morning trying to get out the
Oh, yeah.
door from my kids' preschool. And but and most importantly with my kids too, I hadn't really thought about what you were saying with Daisy, but how I pick up Jacob, my
Mm.
baby. He 1000%, if I'm like off, my brain is like completely left the building and
Mm.
I'm picking him up, and you can feel that he feels unstable, there's
Mm.
crying, versus when I get really grounded and pay
Mm.
attention to that. So that's a wonderful one that I added to my toolkit, thanks to you.
Oh my gosh, you're amazing. Oh, okay. Everybody needs to get a copy of the yoga parenting. I've got it like bookmarked already with like some of these other quotes. This one about William Martin has in here. show them the joy of tasting tomatoes, apples, and pears, show them how to cry when pets and people die. I mean, come on. That's, so much permission there because just the simplicity that you remind us also, it's like, yeah, you can check the boxes and do these things, but just being there and doing the nothing things are so beautiful too. So thank you so much for all of this.
Thank you. And I think that's a good reminder for us for summer too, because this is my first summer of like camps, which is a whole separate podcast and like how to stay calm when you have to move your kid every week or 2 weeks, and then like even getting into camps. But it is a lovely reminder that like it doesn't have to be this perfect, the mat is rolled out and you're all doing yoga together. Like it's just very simply being together and these really simple, it's the in-betweens, I call them, those in-between moments.
So good. Well, thank you so much for your time. And I'm really excited to get through the rest of the book and, more important, do the things. So thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I have Miss Daisy here. We've just talked to Sarah Ezrin. She's a mama too. She wrote this book, The Yoga of Parenting, helping us all be better parents, make good connections. What do you think? Feeling good? Feeling fresh? Deep breaths. Should we take a big inhale together? Big inhale. Long exhale. You want to do that? Say it. Big inhale.
Big exhale.
Yes. Now that we've had a deep breath, we feel better? Always? All right. See you soon.